Okay, as we come in the front door of the shop, on the one side we've got my metal lathe, and above it cabinets full of mostly power tools, and of course the all-important stereo system. More stuff up above, and on the left as we come in, microwave oven, of course, for drying wood and heating up coffee. A little broiler oven for curing polymer clay and warming up various things. Tool chest full of tools. And a filing cabinet, which is where I keep all of my user manuals and instruction books and all that sort of stuff. And it's, all filed by manufacturer and whatnot, so easy to find everything. And then I have my kind of Dremel department, also with a old IV stand, courtesy of Larry, with my Fordham and various Dremel tools. And this tool cabinet here contains all the Dremel bits and power carving bits and that sort of stuff. Continuing along, tool chest full of machining and metalworking tools. My manual metal milling machine, another cabinet full of end mills and various other milling tools. A wall full of wood. I do a lot of flat woodworking, so a lot of planks and boards, and of course turning blanks on the shelves and up above. A clamp rack, of course, because you can never have too many clamps. Terrible workbench. I have this bench for years. It makes do, but it's shaky, and I keep meaning to build a new one. I have all the wood, the devices, plans, just need to find the time to actually put it together. Continuing on down the aisle, we've got my chop saw, and again, more tool storage under that. It's on wheels, so I can pull it out and move it around. More wood storage. We've got a metal cutting bandsaw, and behind that, a CNC carving machine. The motor and spindle on it's too wimpy to really call it a CNC router, but it's good at what it does. Back in the corner here, because I don't get back there too often, I have a bunch of stained glass panels. Every few years I drag my glass out and make a panel or two. A sandblaster up above. And then another wall full of wood. A lot of 3-inch planks, wide planks on the bottom. And then as we come around the corner, I've got my jointer and planer, and tucked in the corner there is a thickness sander and my dust collector and cyclone separation system. Got a mortising machine and my drill press, which I've outfitted with an XY table. Not so much to do milling on it, but it sure comes in handy when you're trying to do precise placement or doing multiples and things like that. Another little tool chest full of drilling accessories. Lathe, we'll get back to that in a second. Behind me, I have my table saw, cabinet saw, with, again, behind that, underneath it, a tool chest full of saw blades and table saw accessories. On the table, we've got the old rigid oscillating belt / spindle sander. Amazing how much I use that machine. I just love that machine, and it just won't quit. Router table, which gets a lot of use. Terrible storage system for my router bits, mostly just in bins and boxes. Takes some time to find what I want. One of these days I plan on enclosing that cabinet and putting in an organizational system for the router bits. And then we get into the turning section. So I've got my one-way 2436, bunch of tools stored in boxes underneath. When I got the lathe, I had to give up my existing turning tool storage system because of the added real estate from the one-way. So for now, tools are stored in boxes haphazardly. Plus, I've got this little rack that I built onto the pendant for my more commonly used tools. And of course, a whole bunch more tools on the ways. In behind the lathe, we've got steady rests and drilling jigs and coring system, and of course the visualizer system that I put together a few months back. Pegboard full of chucks and various other accessories, air filter up above, and a couple of articulated fume extractors, which I use for collecting sanding dust. Up above, I've got some tensioning reels with various air tools hanging from them, and a hair dryer for drying paint and whatnot. And then behind that, I've got my $130 mini lathe that I bought probably 20 years ago. It's been a good old lathe, but the belt went on it, and it's going to be a big job to remove the spindle to replace the belt. So I'm debating whether to keep it or not. It's probably going to get launched. Got my CBN wheels on an underpowered general slow-speed grinder. So one of these days I'll upgrade the grinder to one more powerful. Tool cabinet full of turning accessories, more tool storage, pen making stuff, my sanding disc cabinets for 2 and 3 inch discs, and there's some 1 inch discs in there as well. More storage up above for pen turning stuff. And then my hardware department, full of nuts and bolts and various hardware and bandsaw blades and extension cords and whatnot. It used to be fairly well organized, and it still is to a certain extent, but it needs a lot of work. Need to spend a couple of days sorting through all that stuff. Then we've got my sheet goods rack full of plywood and cardboard and sheet aluminum and whatnot. And then as we come back around the corner, I have my sharpening bench. And on that, we've got my Tormek, which I use for sharpening most of my turning tools, and a little belt sander for sharpening various things, some unfinished turning projects, glue and finishes and whatnot. Got another mini lathe down below. It's an old Carbotech. Don't use that very often, but occasionally. More sanding machines. And then I've got my 17-inch King bandsaw, which I've had for almost 20 years. For a King, it's actually not bad. It's performed fairly well. And currently sitting on the bandsaw table is a circle cutting jig. I was cutting out some circles the other day. And last, up above, we've got my heater and my steampunk cabinets, which Steve Hansen will recognize. And my kind of business central here, it's kind of a little general purpose bench with tool racks, which do open. Inside, I've got my chisels and various other flat woodworking hand tools, nut drivers. On the other side, I've got hand saws and measuring gauges and squares and stuff like that. A lot of my mechanics tools on the pegboard there, and of course my collection of hand planes, which do see action from time to time. And that, I think, concludes my tour.